welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so privileged today. Today we're going to talk about the culture of coaching. We're going to talk a little bit about Bill Campbell, we're going to talk a little about Google, we're going to talk a lot about coaching, we're going to talk a lot about leadership. And we've got no one better than the authors of the fabulous book that you have in your bags, The $1 Trillion Coach. Alan Eagle, Jonathan Rosenberg, Eric Schmidt. Please join me in giving them a really warm welcome.
Can I just ask the audience? Liverpool, Manchester City, which ones are you? Do they have coaches? Are their coaches incredibly famous? British people have coaches too.
Our football teams do.
Well, why not your businesses? The moment I met Bill, I knew my world would be better.
Bill was born in Western Pennsylvania, went to college in New York, played football at Columbia University, and then for the first 12 years of his career, he was a football coach, American football. And not particularly good, by the way, because they'd lost so many games, he decided he's not going to be a good coach. Goes into business, rises through the ranks pretty quickly at Kodak, and then in 1983 gets hired by John Sculley to come west to work for Apple and oversee the launch of the Macintosh. And worked at Apple for several years, rose through the ranks, was a senior executive there, ended up becoming CEO of Intuit, and then didn't go into coaching until the late 90s. So he really had three phases to his career: football coach, business executive, business coach.
But I said, do we pay you? And he said, no. Do you want stock options? And he goes, no. Do you want to be on the board? And he goes, no, it'll get in the way of what I want to do. And all of a sudden I understood I was dealing with something very different from anything I'd encountered before. This is a person who's a saint in the business world. They're working without compensation, and their goal was to make us, and in particular me, successful. When you're dealing with that kind of person in your life, it has an enormous impact.
So Bill didn't just coach people at Google, he coached right across Silicon Valley. How does it feel knowing that he's coaching you, your competitors?
He really didn't coach us with respect to the strategy and the tactics and the product functionality. He coached us as a team. He coached us to be better leaders. He coached us to build trust with our people. And because he wasn't weighing in on the strategy and tactics, it worked for him to coach people at competitors.
And it's remarkable in hindsight, but not only was he intimately involved with Steve Jobs and the management of Apple, but he was also incredibly involved with everything going on at Google, to the point where he engineered my placement onto the Apple board. Until we started writing this book, I never figured out that he was coaching the whole team. I thought he was coaching me. I was aware he was coaching others. But in fact, now when we went back, especially Alan with all of his research, we saw the technique. When anyone on the team started doing their own thing, they kind of stopped playing, they started playing for themselves as opposed to for the team. He would either gently or bluntly get them back in. And furthermore, when Apple and Google, in particular Steve Jobs and Google, had huge conflicts, he would then coach both sides to calm down and talk to each other.
Very nice.
So not only was he coaching both teams, but he was also essentially a peacemaker between them.
But I'll give you just some concrete examples. He would start staff meetings with trip reports.
How many people regularly sit in staff meetings? Quite a few. Are they fun?
But what he did was he started the meeting with a discussion that brought everyone together. Most people show up at the staff meeting and they're ready for battle, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna go in.
What's going on in revenue? Why is your product late? What's going on with this competitor?
But it's very clever because you can't be right or wrong.
You can't be wrong, and you build a rapport with the people in the
Beautiful.
meeting. Give assignments to people in pairs, even when the assignments are things that are easy to do, because then you have different combinations and permutations of executives under your purview who have worked together successfully. And when there's then something that's more contentious, they're going to have a baseline to go back and work from.
And this is kind of a difference between management and coaching, because a manager, you want to be efficient.
Yes.
Is it efficient to give a task to two people
Not
when
as
one
efficient,
person can do it? Is it efficient to go into your staff meeting when you have lots of stuff to get to and spend 10 minutes about what people did on the weekend? No, but it builds camaraderie. It treats people as humans, gets them to like each other, to know each other in different ways. And then when you do need to get down to business, you're going to be a stronger team.
Bill was not looking to coach people who weren't already on the verge of being strong or great. He was looking to coach superstars that he could make better.
Around Bill Campbell, people felt it was an honor to be coached by him, and it must be that, wow, they were pretty good because he could make them great.
When Patrick started after the IPO,
He was a new CFO.
he was a new CFO, and you know, Google, there's a lot of egos and people, and like we haze new executives, and you know, the donor tissue doesn't always, the skin graft doesn't always take, right? And Bill was worried about that with Patrick. So I remember very clearly when Patrick started, Bill took me aside and said, you should reach out to Patrick and you should have lunch with him every Friday for the first 6 months that he's here. I think it would really help, and you know, you can check in on how things are going with him and let me know what's going on and how he's doing as he gets started. So of course, Bill told me to do this, so I'm gonna do it. Well, in interviewing Patrick afterwards, we discovered that he said to Patrick, Rosenberg's this difficult, you know, guy, and he won't make time for new people. He generally hazes people, but Friday's his least busy day. See if he'll have lunch with you on Fridays, and if he will, that's a great signal that the management team is accepting you.
Very cool.
I mean,
By the way, that's a coach.
that's coaching.
I've got some questions in the auditorium. Oh, very quick. Have I got my microphones, please?
I love this throwing of the
Yeah.
microphone. Is this like a British sport?
So I'm interested in understanding, do you think that Bill was a one-off?
Well, I think Bill was clearly a one-off in terms of his personality, his background. He was a remarkable individual, but we probably won't see the likes of that again. And when we were writing the book, we really stopped and had to ask ourselves, is he so remarkable that really we're just writing Bill stories and it's not going to be useful? But like I said earlier, I think that many of the things he did are really simple things, but actually really hard to do. But a lot of people can do them. So if all of you are going out there saying, I need an executive coach like Bill Campbell, that's going to be a tough thing to find, even using Google search. You know, there's just not too many Bill Campbells. But if you start saying, look, I can be that coach. I can work with my peers and my friends and start to do some of these things. That's really what we believe you know, should be the takeaway from the book.
Can I have one at the back there, please? A microphone right at the back there, please.
Oh my
Bit
God.
further
that's
back.
actually a good
Thank
technique.
you. Brilliant. Well
I
done.
love that.
I think the difference between a coach and a mentor is that a coach is there observing you while you're playing in the field, right? So that's sort of the sports analogy, but in the work analogy, I think the same thing is true. A mentor tends to be someone who you go to and share your side and perspective of an experience and ask for direction. The role that the coach plays is very different. The coach is there with you. The coach is encouraging you real time. The coach is calling you on your errors as you make them. And to me, that's very different from a mentor.
So if I'm going to say to you, you know, the way I would do it with you is I'd say, you're the best interviewer in the world. And then next week, when you made some mistake, I'd say, you could have done that better. Notice what I did is I praised you to set a high expectation.
Very good.
And then I pointed out that you fell short to your own aspirations.
And I would want to own that.
And now you are going to lift
Very
yourself,
good.
as opposed to me saying, what a terrible thing you did, which completely cuts you down. That's coaching in its essence.
And he had ways of showing you. What do you think about our presenter, guys?
So, what do you guys think? How's Renee doing?
Now, by the way, what we just did is called the percussive clap. And Bill made a science of this. And whenever there was a long and boring meeting, he would start clapping to get the energy
Something
up.
good had to happen.
Yeah, you usually clap at a moment.
It wouldn't just randomly.
There would be some positive thing, like, oh, you know, there's like positive revenue. What a surprise. Clap, clap, clap. And one of the things that we talk about in the book was that a young product manager was terrified as he presented to the Google board, and Bill sensed that. In the middle of his presentation, he starts clapping. All of a sudden, the energy goes up, the presenter is happy, and so forth. Notice with us, the energy went up in the room.
Very good.
It works. One of the things we learned in writing this book, I've always thought that the most important thing to do was work on strategy, tactics, specific products and technology, and I'm sort of very efficient on that. But in fact, if you look, it's really teams that deliver this. Who invented the iPhone? Everybody in this room thinks Steve Jobs. No, it's 1,000 people. There's something wrong when the coaching is the lowest priority. The coaching is the highest priority. right? Because getting the humans right determined the outcome. The sort of management technique that was in vogue was consensus management. You should get everybody to agree. Bill thought this was a terrible idea. That a much better approach was to have a systematic approach to getting to the best idea. So what we ultimately agreed to was a model where you would start with some question. The people who talk a lot would talk a lot, and then the people who never spoke would also be called on, who often had much more interesting things to say than the first group that always talked. At that point, you try to figure out who was the person or group that actually understood the facts and the data the best, often not in the room, but you would set a deadline to get to a decision, and it had to be the best decision. That process produced almost all of the great outcomes inside of the business. Notice I didn't say consensus, and I didn't say the decisions were made by the founders or the CEO, and I didn't say they were made by the management team. I said they were made by the best people who had the most knowledge and the best judgment in that situation, and that moved around.
Even if they weren't in the room at the time.
Exactly.
And the key part of this best idea decision-making process is that at the end, everyone has to rally around the best idea, even if it wasn't their idea. And we had plenty of stories, that came back from people, who had worked with Bill earlier, where once his teams had got to the best idea, if someone, after they had all decided not to go with that, or speaking behind his back or something, he would fire them.
He was ruthless.
When you see that in a company, when you see someone whose passion and excitement is palpable for another person's success as a manager, that tells you a lot.
Bill and I talked a lot about this principle. You have to go from I to we. You have to go from yourself to the team. The team has to be making the decisions. You need to be supervising it. The sooner you can make that, the sooner you can scale.
But we've got an audience here who love practical, pragmatic nuggets. Things that they can take away, that they can work on themselves, that's going to enhance them, their teams, and their organizations.
Was work really hard during the week, and at a quiet time on the weekend, do an assessment. For me, that was Saturday mornings. Other people, it would be Sunday evening. But during the weekend, when things are a little slower, sit down and think deeply about what did I do well, what did I do poorly? Okay, that's easy. How do I systematize the good stuff? How do I make it happen faster? What's short? What's missing? What am I not doing that will allow a scalable and resilient system to emerge? It's the only time, given the exigencies of the week, when you can actually think about that. And it's crucial because then it informs the way you behave on tactics. Everyone ends up in these operational jobs fighting fires rather than essentially changing the world. You've got to find the time to think about not only your own aspirations, but also how do I achieve them with scale?
We're talking a lot about time management, but one of the things I learned and I try to do is take a few extra minutes to stop and talk to people. It's simple, but you're coming back from lunch, you're heading back to your office, you're rushing to the next meeting, you see some of your team members milling around, so just stop and say hello.
And by the way, I bet you instead all of you guys are on your smartphones as you walk right by your team members. Put your smartphone away for a minute, unless it's an Android phone. No.
We had this great anecdote.
But my point is, take a minute. Like, don't you remember before smartphones when you would sit in the elevator and you actually talk to the people in the elevator? This wasn't that many years ago.
No, it's beautiful.
I mean, it's a simple thing. Take a few minutes and treat people as humans.
I'm going to get my smartphone out now.
Please tonight welcome back Brendan. Brendan, come back on, please, just to give us a little closer.
I want to show our guests from on the other side of the pond that we're not always very reserved. I want you to thank you in a very un-British way. I want you to stand, go wild, if you can wolf whistle, if you've got a foghorn, whatever it is. These guys are incredibly busy. We're so grateful that they found time to be with us today, to inform us, to make us laugh, and to share such practical and powerful insight. As they leave the stage, we're going to thank Jonathan Rosenberg, Alan Eagle, and Eric Schmidt.
Okay, no, this is it.